Just 2 more steps to make sure that we get our email input working with Redux instead of local component state. The first thing we need to do is make sure that our reducer watches for an action of the appropriate type. So right now, it's always just passing back state object, which right now is just an empty object with an email property. We need to make sure that we watch for this action of type email changed and then update our state object appropriately. Now, let's flip over to my action creator, email change. So here it is right here. I'm inside of my actions index file. Right now we've got a type of email changed, and that type is, very literally a string. It is a string that says email changed. So I want to pause here for a second and point something out to you. This string right here is forming an incredibly strong link between this action and the reducer, right? Like this string right here, this literal string right here, we have to reproduce over inside of our reducer file right here and make sure that there's like no typos in there whatsoever. If I end up making a small typo on either side, so something like, email changed, email changed, right? Like it's so easy to make a typo like that. What's the difference? If I make a typo like that, then my reducer is never going to properly pick up on this action when it's dispatched. So to solve this issue, the convention in the Redux community is to make variables to hold our actions type. So let's pull up a diagram and check out what the idea behind this is. Okay, so we're going to make a new file called types.js. So a new file just called types. Inside of this file, we're going to make a set of constant variables and assign them a string. So we will create a variable like capital email changed equals email changed, or another one like password underscore changed equals password changed. So these 2 variable names, email changed and password changed, and we're going to assign them a string. Then we're going to import that into both our reducer and our action. And we're going to use that variable as opposed to just a raw string. So the point here, the idea behind this, is that we're going to avoid making any very small typo like, accidentally dropping off the D or the I or, whatever it might be in that literal string that we're typing out. By using a variable instead, if I reference a variable of like email change, like all capitals right here, and I say drop off the D inside of the action file, I'm going to get a big error message that says like, hey, I got no idea what variable you're referencing here, like email change. I have no idea what that is. And so it's a very clear signal to you as the developer that, oh, okay, you know what, I must have made a typo somewhere in there. I need to go fix up my types. So let's give this a shot, see how it works in practice. Honestly, it's not the worst thing in the world, so let's just kind of blow through it real quickly. Inside of my actions folder, I'm going to make a new file called types.js. Now inside of here, we're going to put all of the definitions for all the different types that we're going to have in our application over time. So one file, all of the actions types. Then inside of here, we will say export const email changed is a lowercase string email changed. Now one thing that I want to point out to you, like really clear, just be really clear about this string right here does not have to match the variable name. There is absolutely no tie between the value of the string and the variable name. This just has to be a string that is unique against all the other actions we have. Because remember, the only purpose of it is to make sure that we've got some like little marker on both the action and the reducer. So it can be anything we want. By convention, I like to make it just the same as the action's name. Also, it really doesn't matter if I use lowercase characters or uppercase. No big difference there. All right, so now we've got our action type defined here. Now I'm going to flip over to my actions file. So I'm going to go to actions index.js. And then at the top, we're going to import that action type that we just created. So at the top, I will import email changed from types. And it's in the same directory, so I'm going to do just /types. Finally, instead of the type of just a string right here, I will replace this with email changed. Cool, looks good. Just to be really clear about one other thing, because I get a lot of questions about this, inside of my types file, I expect to export many different types from this file, right? We're going to have like a lot of different types because we're going to have a lot of different actions. So because I expect to export many different things from here, I'm going to make what is called a named export. So I say export const and then the variable name. You'll notice that I did not use the default keyword. And I didn't use the default keyword because I expect to export many other types like this from this file. The flip side to that, again, is that whenever I import from the types file, I have to use the curly braces to say, hey, you know what, there's many different things inside that types file. I specifically want email changed. And I indicate that by using the curly braces. All right, so now the next thing we need to do is pull this type into our auth reducer. So I'm going to flip over to the auth reducer. Here it is. And at the top, we will import that actions type. So we'll import email changed from type actions types. And then inside the switch statement, we will now add a new case of email changed. And then right here, this is where we'll put our logic to handle this new email that's coming across inside the action. One other very common error that, let me just tell you, this is by far the most common error that I see in any Redux application. Any question I get, like, it's probably a 10% chance it's tied to this bug that I'm about to tell you right now. One thing to be aware of with named exports like this, what we're using right here, is that I can pull in any arbitrary property that I want from this actions types file, right? I can do something like email changed, blah, 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 even if it doesn't exist. I can try to import this and no error will be thrown, okay? No error will be thrown. What's gonna happen is if I console log this value right here, I'm not gonna actually run this code, so please do not reproduce this. If I did a console log right here, this would come across as undefined. Okay, so it would come across as undefined. I'm not going to see an error message. And what the result is that if I then use this like mystery undefined type right here inside of my reducer, I'm going to essentially have a case of case undefined. But as we all know, every action must have a type of not undefined, like it must have a declared type. And so my action will never catch anything inside the reducer. So extremely common error that I see all the time. If you ever come across a situation where you're thinking to yourself, gee whiz, I know I'm calling the action creator. I have like, a console log in there or something, but it seems that the reducer is never actually picking up on this action. If you ever say that to yourself, the first thing I want you to look at is the import statement up here. I want you to look at this. I want you to say, okay, did I actually define an action of this type up here? And if you did, great, it must be something else, but double check it, make sure that that action actually exists. And a really easy way that you can troubleshoot that is to just add a console log in here and say like, action. A very easy way to make sure that your actions type is actually properly defined. Okay, so anyways, a little bit of a side note there, but I know that some number of people will make that mistake, and so I just probably saved some number of you from making a frustrating little mistake there. So it is worth the time to mention. Okay, so our reducer is now properly catching on type email changed, which means we'll take a quick break and come back in the next section and figure out how we're going to update our state object inside the reducer. This is going to open a big can of worms and definitely one of the most important topics in this entire application, so let's take care of it in the next section.